Yeah. Well, yeah, it's like against our human nature to settle for things and to go against what's comfortable, because a
Yeah.
lot of times the scary and the perfectionism, like we're just afraid of not being comfortable. And we like what we're used to. We like the stability of the same old, same old. And we want to only move forward, at least as perfectionists, if we can do something that we know is comfortably perfect.
Yes. Yes. Hey, friends. Welcome back to the Higher Pursuit podcast. I'm your host, Cecily Lachapelle, and today we're kicking off a powerful two-part series that I know is going to speak straight to your heart. I'm so excited to introduce you to my friend, Lauren Black. Lauren and I originally connected through a Facebook group, but over time, that connection grew into friendship, and I am beyond thrilled to have her on the podcast. Lauren is the host of the Anchored Decisions podcast and a decisions coach who, get this, used to call herself the world's worst decision maker. And honestly, that's what makes her story so relatable. In this conversation, Lauren opens up about how the pain of perfectionism kept her stuck, overthinking, and paralyzed when it came to making choices. Man, can anyone relate? But thank God, he didn't leave her there. She's going to share how that pain led her to create the SAIL, S-A-I-L method, a beautiful faith-centered framework for decision-making that blends self-awareness, intentional reflection, and trusting God in the process. We're going to unpack how perfectionism, fear, and people-pleasing can cloud our clarity, but how prayer, journaling, and real inner work can lead us back to peace. If you've ever struggled with indecision, felt overwhelmed by trying to find the quote-unquote right answer, or worried about letting others down, these episodes are for you. So grab your journal, my friend, take a deep breath, and let's dive into part one of this eye-opening and freeing conversation with Lauren Black. Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Higher Pursuit podcast. We are so glad that you joined us. And if you're looking for content that will encourage you, that will build you up in your pursuit of Jesus, and sometimes challenge you, then you've tuned into the right podcast. The series that we're in right now is called Repurposing Our Pain. And today I am joined by an amazing guest, Lauren Black. Lauren is self-professed as the world's biggest overthinker turned decision coach, all by the grace of God. After years of struggling with indecision and failing to find an effective decision-making system, Lauren drew on her experience as a brand strategist to craft her own decision-making framework that she calls the SAIL method. Her process is rooted in integrating your personality, your preferences, your passions, your priorities, all wrapped in prayer. Lauren's framework is the cornerstone of her one-to-one decision coaching, strategic decision guides, and not to mention the Anchored Decisions show. Lauren's mission is clear: empowering Christian women to make confident decisions, take decisive action, and live with purpose. So welcome, Lauren.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
I'm so excited. I think it's so neat how God connects people, because I discovered your podcast, and therefore you, on a Facebook group that we're both a part of. I don't even remember which one it was. It's a Christian podcasters group. And I think I might have commented on some posts that you made or something. And then I noticed that you were asking people to participate in a prayer challenge in January. So I reached out to you because I think I was like late to the party to sign up to be one of your facilitators. You were asking people to create a, what did you call it? What did you call those people?
Yeah, the prayer leaders.
Prayer leaders. Yes. And so I had offered to be a part of it, but the slot that you thought was open was actually already full. But I just thought, I'm going to be a part of this anyway, because this is such a great great thing to be a part of. And then lo and behold, one of your prayer leaders couldn't fulfill their slot. So you reached out and asked if I would do it. And I jumped in to do that. And then we just got chatting and decided that we would swap podcast interviews. So here we are. I am
Yes,
so
yes. I loved
excited.
having you on my show. Your story just was so inspiring. And so yeah, thanks for having me on yours.
Thank you. So, if you haven't seen it, I was on Lauren's podcast, and she can give us an idea of when that's going to air. But I was talking about the decision that I struggled with for 2 years that I've talked about on this show, about leaving my corporate job to step out into the nothingness of ministry. Feeling kind of like Abraham when God said, just get up and leave here and go. And Abraham says, okay, great. Where are we going? And God says, well, I will give you more information when you get up and go. So that was really kind of what we discussed. And it was so fun to chat with you. You have an amazing podcast, and we're going to be giving information about how you all can connect with Lauren. And I know by the end of this podcast, you're going to want to check out her information, her podcast, her resources, her coaching, because all of us hit parts of our lives where the road seems murky. We know we've hit a fork in the road, and for some reason, we're either just not sure which way to go, or we're struck with fear to actually make that important decision. So that's what we're going to talk about today. But first of all, Lauren, I have a weather question to ask you. You're in Florida. I'm in New England. What is the temperature going to be where you are today?
Probably around 90. It's been hot.
Oh, I
This is
can't
April for
even.
those who don't know when we're recording. So it's been in like the 89, 90 range. You walk outside and you're starting to sweat. Even in the early morning and late at night, there's no break. It's already
Oh,
getting to be summer.
oh my gosh. I'm just like, I almost want to just stop this right now because I can't even stand how envious I am. I am so over winter, so over it. And technically we're in spring, and it's going to be, excuse me, a balmy 42 degrees here. 42 degrees. I can't even stand it. All right, well, let's get into our content. You describe yourself as the world's biggest overthinker turned decision coach. Can you take us back to the moment when you realized that your struggle with decision making was actually holding you back?
Yes. So, little backstory. I started my own business. My first business is graphic design, and I still do that business to this day, but it's not my primary business. It's not my end goal. I found that as a solo designer, I was burning out, and I
Ugh,
either needed to hire a team to help with some of the design load, hire a marketing team to fill up my schedule because I'd be in that feast or famine mode where I'd
yeah, I get
fill up
that.
my roster with clients, stop marketing myself so I could do the work. And then when I finished those projects, I'd
Mhm.
have no clients and I'd have to market myself again. And it just wasn't sustainable. I'm like, I need
Yeah.
something else. I need some passive income or someone to help in some way. So I turned to God in prayer and my, kind of reverse engineering skills that I use with my design clients. I'm like, okay, I'm going to use this on myself and see what's needed, what's best for me, where are my past skills and my strengths.
Mm.
And so as I'm journaling and praying through this and working out the best option, God laid it on my heart to design workbooks for Christian women. And so I got all excited. I'm like, okay, I've got a direction. But then I kind of took it my own way and, blew it up into something that it was never meant to be. God told me to make them for Christian women. I'm like, I could serve so many more people if I serve everyone. And then I'll just
Oh
throw in some
gosh.
Bible verses here and there and, evangelize to people through my business, which some businesses are meant to do that. My calling was not that. So I was trying to figure out some side gig. I also had a graphic designer group where a Facebook group that was thriving with a partner that we were trying to help graphic designers, especially those who were self-taught, to grow their design businesses.
Mm.
And then I had a blog for Christian women. And, I started all sorts of side gigs and never really gave any one of them enough time and commitment to take off. And even
Wow.
with my graphic design business, I kept changing the type of clients that I wanted to work with and the type of work that I wanted to do. Like, oh, okay, I'm going to do web and social media graphics. Now I want to do branding. Now I want to do websites. And so I was constantly flip flopping. None of my businesses and the ideas that I had were taking off. And so finally, a few years later, after having 2 kids and kind of just having my graphic design business, I felt God calling me back to those workbooks for Christian women. And I was like, God, I am not going to step forward into this until you give me a topic. Because the last time I had tried to make workbooks for Christian women, I had marketing workbooks and find your path and purpose workbooks and content planning workbooks.
Oh my
And the
gosh.
umbrella over it was just not clear. And so it didn't allow me to be able to market in a good way. It was confusing messaging for people. And I didn't really have any one set thing that I helped people with. And so I said,
Wow.
God, I can't keep doing this where I'm flip-flopping my mind. I have kids now and my time is way too short. I didn't have childcare full time. And so I was like, I can't keep doing this. And that is when I realized the indecision was what was holding me back from all these businesses, from any one thing taking off. And so a couple months later, after praying and praying, actually, I think it was about 6 months of praying over, God, what direction? What am I helping people with? Because I can't just keep flip-flopping. And God laid it on my heart that you are going to help people with decisions. And I protested. I was like, God, I am the worst at making decisions. And he said, that's exactly why you need this. You need this for you, and you need to help others that are like you to overcome their indecision.
Hi, everybody. While I hate to interrupt a good discussion, I do want to tell you about my book, Repurpose Your Pain, Moving from Pain to Purpose and from Instability to Firm Faith. In the book, I share 10 pain points that are common to most people, and I share my personal stories, my experiences with those pain points, and how I repurposed that pain. Then we dive into what the Word of God has to say about how we repurpose that pain. You need to know that this book is really 2 books in one, because it includes workbook activations to help you apply the truth that you've learned to your life. So grab your copy today on Amazon, Christian book distributors, or any place books are sold. That is awesome. So I hope you guys heard a couple things that Lauren just dropped. First of all, what I heard was that the thing that is her weakness is the very thing that God is going to use for her ministry to help other people, because as she has taken this ground of learning how to become a better decision maker, it is it's such a passion for her, because she was so stuck in indecision that a ministry was born out of that. So literally the thorn in her flesh became the very revelation that God is using to help a bunch of us. The other thing that I heard is that she's a highly gifted person. She's entrepreneurial. She's creative. She's trained. She can do graphic design. She can do decision making. She can plan content. She can take something, a project, from A to Z, from the actual, I don't even have any customers, to a finished product being in someone's hands. That is a rare person. And so there are some of you who are listening to this. You are almost overgifted. And the problem with that is that there are so many lanes you can run in, and it makes it even harder to choose what lane to run in. Because if you're a one-trick pony, that's a no-brainer. But when we have training in multiple areas, and when we have giftedness in multiple areas, it's actually harder to choose, I think. And what do you think about, Lauren? Do you find that makes it even more challenging?
Absolutely. Even in general decision making, there was a study done where they brought to a market 24 jams and put them out for people to sample and to buy. And the 24 jams had tons of people interested, but not that many people purchased. When they put out 6 jams, they maybe didn't create as much buzz and attract as many people to the booth to try the jams, but they had way more sales because there were less options to choose from. So when you have so many
Whoa.
options, just as like you said, when you're multi-passionate, it's harder to narrow down and make a decision.
Oh my gosh. Well, that answers some things. That answers some things. Wow, that's amazing. So I feel like, at least in my life, fear has often played a major role in keeping me stuck in the gate. I've known a decision needs to be made, or sometimes even I've even known what the decision is. And I'm just wondering if you could talk to that. Like, what are specific fears that kept you from making or sticking to decisions throughout your life?
Yes. So I think I had a lot of fear around each different aspect had fear. So
Mm,
when I had fear of choosing one thing and neglecting something else that I was passionate about, that okay, if I take this direction, am I ever going to design again?
right?
And then I had my biggest fear was fear of failure and
Come on,
fear
girl.
of disappointing myself and looking like a or a failure to others.
Oh,
And I
man.
know our identity shouldn't be planted in that, but it's still a struggle for me a lot of times
Yeah, the
that,
struggle is real.
yeah. And a fear of not living up to the expectations set in my family. I know I have siblings. I'm one of five, and
Mm.
three of them have a master's or higher degree. And everybody, we've got an engineer, a physical therapist that's a doctorate of physical therapy. We've got a physician's assistant and a speech therapist. So all these high level, high achieving people. And then here's me with these businesses that keep flopping and that
Oh.
I can't make up my mind long enough to have one take off. And even other decisions in my life, like
Mm.
when we were deciding whether or not to have kids, when, my sisters were all getting pregnant, and every time someone would ask me like, "Oh, are you guys ready?" I'd have a different answer. And, even with buying houses, we'd go
Yes.
to meet with a realtor and get cold feet. We backed out of an offering that we went to put an offer in on. And, every little thing in my life was just fear of, oh, am I making the wrong choice? I think that was the biggest one, that I was afraid to
Mhm.
commit to any one because I didn't
Yeah.
want it to be the wrong choice.
Do you feel like perfectionism plays a part in that? Because I know it does for me.
Absolutely. Because, yeah, that's a huge part of that fear of making the wrong choice because we want it to be the perfect choice every
Right.
time.
Yes. Yeah. I actually have affirmations that I have written probably over the last 25 years, and I'm just continually adding to them. And one of the ones that is sort of near the top is that I tell myself that successful people enjoy making mistakes because they know that they learn through every mistake, and there's not one highly successful person who got to where they are without making lots of mistakes. And that might seem like, well, duh, doesn't everybody know that? Well, yeah, I think we know that on a cognitive level, but on a heart level, that's not the way we want to live. At least not me. I want to live from glory to glory, from perfect decision to perfect decision, from perfect situation to even more perfect situation. And the whole idea of it's actually part of my purpose to make some bad decisions and learn from them, it makes me want to kind of throw up in the back of my mouth.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's like against our human nature
Yeah.
to settle for things and to go against what's comfortable, because a
Yeah.
lot of times the scary and the perfectionism, like we're just afraid of not being comfortable. And we like what we're used to. We like the stability of the same old. And we want to only move forward, at least us perfectionists, if we can do something that we know is comfortably perfect.
Yes. Yes. And that's why I didn't want to leave my corporate job because I was good at it. I was compensated well for it. And I received almost on a daily basis that affirmation that I thrive on. People saying, "Oh gosh, Cecily, we couldn't do this without you." Or my boss is saying, "Oh, you saved my bacon and this is amazing. And, I couldn't travel without you." Or gosh, I couldn't keep up with all that I do without, I feed on that being needed and doing it well. And so that made leaving that to go into the unknown incredibly difficult. So let's get back to you. Was there a particular moment or a season that was the wake up call for you? And what did that look like?
Yeah, I think that's parenting. You know, I
Mm,
I had such little amount of time to dedicate to my business. And then I started feeling guilty that, okay, if I've put all this time into building different businesses that have not taken off in the way that I wanted them to,
mm.
then I could have just stayed at my corporate job for longer and had a lot more money to contribute and then quit and stayed home with the kids fully instead of, splitting my time. Like there's a lot of mom guilt involved,
Ah,
but it was, yeah, once I had kids that I'm like, okay, time's too precious. I can't keep wasting it. I can't not succeed at this point
mm.
because otherwise I would have spent my kids' early years all in vain.
Yeah. 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 And how did your faith in the Lord help you navigate through the pain and the fear of making the decisions that you were making?
Yeah. Well, I think back in the day of my indecision, I would pray over something and pray for a decision, but not really that hard.
Mm,
I didn't really journal my prayers back then as
come
much,
on.
and I would just like say a prayer as I'm falling asleep at night. And I
Mm,
wasn't listening for God. I wasn't active in trying to seek out his direction.
say that.
And yeah, finally my sister during COVID, my sister was going through this Bible study that was called Draw the Circle. And it was this prayer book, Draw the Circle. And so you pray over something for 40 days, the same thing. And
Mm,
so she felt a calling from God in the middle of that. And so I'm like, well, I need to do that. And while I didn't get a calling during that time, because part of me was like just doing the study so I could get a calling just like her instead
yeah.
of to actually just connect with God deeper. But that taught me
Mm,
the power of journaling and how to really focus on the same item, even if you don't hear from God day one, and how to keep bringing it to the feet of Jesus. And so now my relationship with God related to decisions is completely different. And the closer you are to God, the better you'll be with your decision making. And I've gotten to the point where there are some things I go to pray over a decision and I instantly know exactly what I need to do. And that's
mhm,
partly from my decision making framework and the foundation I've set there. But then it's also just knowing my Father's voice, knowing
mm,
those nudges, and
yeah.
even with that prayer challenge that you mentioned that you were a part of at the beginning of the year, I got called to that in the middle of December. I was working on a client graphic design project, and God laid it on my heart 30 days of prayer for the new year. And so I just got out a piece of paper and I scribbled it down real quick. I'm like, okay, what does this mean? How am I going to execute this? And at first, I went to stop and pray over it because I was like, okay, well, I don't want to be just another flip flopper and jumping on every idea like I used to in the past. So I've gotten more cautious before I
Mhm.
just jump on something that comes to my head.
That's
But I
good.
knew at that point, this was from God. This was not just one of my thoughts. I would not have come up with that thought in the middle of doing a design project for someone. And like, this had to have been from God. And I knew his voice so well that I was able to jump on it. And I saw so much fruit from that challenge and
Mm.
that I knew that was from God.
Yes. So I want to go back to a couple things that you said. First of all, you mentioned how journaling really helped you fine tune your ability to hear the voice of God. I found that in my own life. I write about it in the book. And in my book, Repurpose Your Pain, there are journaling exercises all throughout. In each chapter, I have a section called Press Pause, where I just kind of like hit the brakes right in the middle of the chapter. And we're like, okay, we need to stop right here. We need to press pause and we need to do some metacognitive thinking about what we're thinking about and get out a journal and start writing what you're feeling right now and let God begin to speak to you. And then we'll proceed with the rest of the chapter. But then in the activations at the back of the book, which is where the workbook is, they're all tons of journaling and note taking exercises. So I would die on the hill of journaling. I think that is such an important thing. So I'm always excited when somebody agrees with me about that. So
Yes.
talk to me about how that helped you hear the voice of God.
Yes. Well, I think journaling does a few things. One, it helps you focus. So if I'm just praying in my head, a lot of times I'll start thinking about my kids and what activities we have going on that day, or my grocery list, or my brain just wanders. We are women. We tend to do
Mm-hmm.
that. And so the journaling part, first and foremost, helps you focus, because you're not going to just start rambling with your writing and start writing out your
Yes.
to-do. I mean, some people you might get distracted and turn to a different page and write out your to-do list. But for the most part, you're focused. And then second, writing opens our brain to a different kind of, I don't even know how to describe it. I wish I knew the psychology terms behind it, but
Mm,
it opens your brain to creativity and other thinking than what you just do in your head. And so
yes.
as you're putting pen to paper, and the one business that I started was all about journaling, basically your marketing ideas, and journaling, I had these workbooks. So all of them are meant to be written out. I didn't want people doing them digitally. I said, do these with pen and paper, because it'll
Mm-hmm.
unlock different parts of your brain to allow you to think, differently. And so when you're
Yes.
talking with God through that, you're more intentional with the things that you're saying. And
Mm-hmm.
then I often will pause and just kind of listen. And, sometimes I'm journaling something and something comes to my brain that I write down. I'm like, that wasn't me. That was from
Right.
God. And so
Yes.
then you have documentation that you can go back and look at what God said to you, how he spoke, things that you're like,
Yes.
that clearly was not me, because I wouldn't have come up with that on my own. And you
Yes.
can see how he's answered your prayers. And so it encourages your faith and really just connects you deeper to the Father.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I have gobs of journals in every shape, size, and color because I've been journaling for, I don't know, I've been saved for 40 years. So pretty much that whole time. And I know a number of those years the journals are gone, but I have so many of them. And so one time I decided to go back and put one of those like little post-it flags on every page where God spoke something to me, that it wasn't just me communicating to God. And I noticed a pattern. I noticed that in seasons where I had to make a big decision, or decisions were happening around me that were impacting my life, and I felt out of control about those decisions, or times when I was really emotionally broken and the Lord knew that I needed a word, that he interrupted in the most gracious, loving way, interrupted my thought process to speak something to me. And Lauren, you are absolutely right when you say, then we have documentation. Because one of my projects that I have for down the road at some point is I would love to take all of those post-it flags and write them out so that I have my own book of all of the things that God has said to me in chronological order. Because what I'm noticing is that things that God is saying to me are getting more and more and more specific, because I'm able now to hear his voice on a more clear level. And those directions are invaluable, invaluable. And I highly recommend that. And I agree with you also about the fact that journaling unlocks a part of our brain and our focus. I am a very bounce around thought process person, and my mind can jump like whack-a-mole from one thing to the next. And that's probably one of the main reasons I never really put it together. So I'm so glad you said that. But I think that does force my mind to stay focused on the scripture that I'm writing about, or the concern, that the prayer request that I'm writing, or just his presence. And so I think that that's outstanding.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Higher Pursuit podcast. We hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as we did. Remember, this was just the beginning. There's so much more to come. Be sure to tune in next week for the continuation. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with your friends. You can also follow on Instagram, on Facebook, and on TikTok to stay updated with all our latest episodes and news. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.